Hello, and welcome to the Fourth U Dimension podcast slash YouTube video series. I'm Colin Wulff, Assistant Director of Religious Education at the Fourth Universalist Society in New York City. I'm standing in for our usual host, our Director of Religious Education, Ember Kelly. This is a sub-series of the Fourth U Dimension called Getting the Message, in which we interview our Sunday service guest speakers and do a follow-up in-depth exploration of what they had to say. Today, our guest is Ali Peters. Ali is a graduate of Union Theological Seminary and is sponsored by Fourth Universalist as she prepares for ordination to become a Unitarian Universalist minister. Currently, Ali serves as intern minister at Fox Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Appleton, Wisconsin. And she just offered us a sermon on the concept of enough. What is enough? Is it achievable? How do we know we've achieved it? And when should we wish to? If you are joining us on just the audio podcast alone, we'll be sharing the sermon prior to the interview. That'll be coming up right next. And if you're joining us just by this YouTube video, the sermon has been uploaded separately to our Fourth U YouTube channel. You can check that out. But on this video, we'll be going straight to the Getting the Message conversation. Either way, it is my pleasure to introduce Ali Peters. Ali, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for that warm and uplifting reflection on this idea of enough. Now, why is that a timely one to explore, and what moved you to talk about it?
Hi, Colin. It's so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
I think oftentimes when I'm writing a sermon, I end up writing a sermon that needs to be preached to myself, and so I think this one kind of came from a lot of feelings of a lot of yearning to experience this feeling of enough, and whether it's like I am enough or whether it is this moment that I'm living in right now is enough. I think it would really just came from a yearning for that, and so I wanted to explore it.
Yeah, thank you. I remember you saying in the reflection actually that it wasn't what you had expected to say when you'd settled on that topic of enough, that it kind of went somewhere that you had to follow instinctively, but that wasn't your original plan. So what had been the original plan? How did it morph, and why?
Yeah, so there wasn't really an original plan, but I think I anticipated the sermon being about enough, as in an amount, and what having enough feels like, and as opposed to having too much or having too little, being happy with what we have. I think I kind of anticipated it going in that direction. I think that whole appreciate what you have angle kind of is one that makes me feel a little itchy. And that's what drove me in a different direction, because so many reasons. One is that can gloss over so many problems and inequities in our world, and also the idea of who am I to say that, you got enough, it's fine. And I think when I really kind of followed that thread and dove a little deeper, and I found the reading that we read today, it was a passage from Lynn Twist, who's the co-founder of the Pachamama Alliance. I hadn't heard of her before I read this passage from her book, but she talks about how we can't think of sufficiency in that way, in the way of an amount that just doesn't work. And I think that that's really wise, because it just shows how we've been trained by capitalism and by the structures around us to think of things that way. So I think my original thoughts were kind of conditioned by what I've been trained to believe about enough or sufficiency.
Yeah, I really appreciated towards the end of your sermon that you brought up the problems sometimes with kind of a universal message of take what you have and be grateful for it, and sometimes we hear that word enough. Actually, it's used very much in the opposite way, as more of a rallying cry for action and for progress. You hear candidates and politicians on the stump, and activists will say, enough of this state of affairs. It's an indication of something that needs to change. So if there's a little more to it than just this complacency, this capitalistic metric of material goods. What is it then that we should seek for when you talk about allowing ourselves to be drawn into moments of sufficiency? What is the nuance there that is different from that more dangerous message?
Yeah, so I think if we unravel that, what you call dangerous message, thank you for that wording, if we unravel that, and kind of look beyond the structures that we're so conditioned into, and the ideas that have really shaped the way we see the world, if we unravel all of that, we're left with just existence, right? We're left with the earth. The earth, I think, is our best teacher for those kinds of, when we're trying to do that unraveling work, I think, because the earth was here long before us, the earth will be here long after us. And that's why I think the moment that I kind of connected this message to the Wendell Berry poem that I read in the sermon, really felt like an aha moment to me. Would you mind if it's short, would you mind if I read it again right now?
Please, absolutely.
So this is a poem by Wendell Berry called The Peace of Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests its beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. And I think, thinking about that poem in the context of thinking about this idea of enough and sufficiency, I think that poem does a lot of that unraveling work for us that we were just talking about. In particular, I find now myself, when I'm worried, or when I'm feeling anxious about something, or when I'm feeling like I'm not enough, perhaps I think about the line. I tell my brain to remember the line of that poem. The wild things that do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. And that always feels, it kind of clicks right into place of, oh wait, no, just by existing, we are enough, and this moment is enough. So
Yeah, I think there's a lot of wisdom there. There's somehow a difference between identifying lived problems and practical needs, and gratuitously, masochistically borrowing additional burdens on top of that. Yeah. You gave the example of one person's understanding of enough as their relationship to their farm and the livestock and the land. That connects to what you just said about the earth's enduring existence. Do you have some personal examples you'd be willing to share about times when you really felt drawn into that experience of earthly sufficiency?
yeah, I've started a spiritual practice when I go on walks. I try to remember to say hello to trees. Um, I I've just, in recent years, actually it was after reading the novel The Overstory. I don't know if you've heard of it or read it, by Richard Powers. Such a great book. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, it's on our family bookshelf for years, and I've always been kind of intrigued by it, and just one of the ones that I haven't yet peeled off the shelf. I'll take your recommendation to heart.
So good. And the work that it does, so the work that Richard Powers does to personify trees, and the arc of trees' lives, and how, you know, how old trees actually are, and um, how humans just haven't appreciated the lives of trees and learned from trees in ways that we can. Anyway, so I've started the spiritual practice of saying hello to trees, and just kind of, it grounds me in remembering that all of the stuff, the noise, I like to say, of the world around us, the the stuff that you and I mentioned is trying to unravel, the capitalism, the comparison, the competition, all of that is human made. And trees know what's up, right? Like trees live outside of that. And sometimes I'll just kind of like reach my hand out to just kind of touch a tree's bark and try and feel its soul, if you will. I know that sounds kind of cheesy, but yeah, and I think that helps ground me in remembering what's important, and that, you know, it's enough to just exist sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. Coming from a theater background, a lot of what you said really resonated with me. I think for a lot of performing gig economy artists, that feeling, that wash of sadness you described, even during the highs of life, where you never quite felt that you could give your grandmother enough time, that she was always watching the clock run down and filling what precious time there was with disappointment. I hear so many artists uh, share similar feelings when, you know, they work and work to book a job, and the first thing that occurs to them isn't, I got hired to do this dream role. It's, well, this is going to upset the day job that has actually been supporting me. This is a moment of goodbye to my local community, and then when I'm actually working it, I'm always aware of its perishability. I have to book the next one within a matter of weeks, and it never quite feels like enough. And so there's a lot to gain from not feeling like we need to choose between prudence and presence. So I really appreciate that. One last thing I want to ask you about, for our Time for All Ages segment, where we share a story that's related to the theme with our youngest members and ask them about it. You brought in an original creation, a story about one Pasha the squirrel, and you put these lovely real life photos with it to punctuate the events of the story. And I don't want our listeners or viewers to miss out on the context for the reference you made to it in your sermon. So I wonder if you might connect the dots between that story and your theme a little bit for us before we say goodbye.
Yeah, for sure. This is another example of when I thought I was going to do one thing and then it ended up going a completely different direction. Because when I decided to write a story about squirrels gathering acorns, I anticipated it being about deciding how much was enough acorns. And that's ended up not being what it was about at all. So the story, it tells a story in the fall of Squirrel Pasha starting to gather acorns for the winter. And then so he would gather acorns in the morning and hide them for the winter, and then play with his friend Raina in the afternoon. And while he's gathering these acorns, he encounters a raccoon who says, "Oh, that's not enough, you should gather more," and a spider who says, "You're gathering way too much, how greedy are you?" And Pasha just kind of, stays steady, knowing what she needs to do. And at one point, her friend Raina, the squirrel that she plays with every afternoon, is sad. And sad because you can tell it's really affected by the seasons. The sunlight is getting less and less every day. It's getting colder. And I think I designed some of that off of my own experience of, mental health vulnerability in the winter. But so she's sad and she doesn't feel like she has the energy to do what she needs to do to prepare for the winter and collect acorns. And the story ends with Pasha coming to visit her friend Raina. And Raina tells Pasha that she's worried because she doesn't have enough acorns for the winter. And Pasha says, "That's okay, I collected enough for the both of us." So there was another exploration of the idea of enough, a collective enough, right? And then Raina's response to that is a response I think we all can kind of relate to, which was, "Oh, why would you do something so nice for me? I haven't done anything for you, and I haven't done enough." And then Pasha's answer is, "Oh, but you are enough. You don't need to do anything to deserve help from a friend because you are enough." And then there was another exploration of enough, I think, that was really valuable. And then it moved into, just them embracing each other and that moment of friendship feeling like enough. So I think the story explores kind of these different other ways of experiencing enough that we might not often think about.
Yeah, it was a very good setup for your reflection. And another thing I really liked about that story is even when the metric was agreed on, right, number of acorns, the different animals had such a different relationship to the quantity involved based on their personal circumstances and the way they were shaped and their appetites. And so there's an empathic aspect to this as well, of remembering that there are not only different objects of enough in play, but different amounts, different needs, different circumstances. So that was really lovely. Thank you for sharing that and your sermon with us. I really appreciate your coming today.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you.
this is Allie Peters, really delighted to have her. And thank you for listening to the Fourth U Dimension podcast slash YouTube video. If you're watching on YouTube, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. And see you next time. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you again, Allie.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care.